Welcome to the A New Narrative podcast, where we discuss all things health and human design. I'm Sam Zagar, your projector guide and host. This is a show about deconditioning. My goal is to confront our conditioned, not self narratives so that we can write them anew through the lens of our true selves. It's through this process that I hope to guide you to your signature life. Okay, hello and welcome to A New Narrative. Today is like an unofficial part 2 of a conversation that I had last week with Ean. Now, we were on his YouTube channel, really great conversation, but I wanted to reserve some of my more intentional guiding. I tend to want to take over the conversation, so I was like, let's come onto my podcast so I can take over this one. I want my audience to know a little bit about who you are so that as we talk, they can either relate to you or not relate to you. So would you share your name, your profile, your type, and your authority?
Yeah. So my name is Ean Dane Lindblom, or in a full correct sentence structure, I could say for the Ian-Dane of the Lindblom, which is kind of fun to say sometimes. I'm a 1-3 generator emotional authority. So I've got all 4 of my motors, the sacral, the root, the solar plexus, and the ego defined together, and then a 1648 on the other side over there. And so, yeah, it's been quite a journey.
And one of the things that we talked about in the conversation on your side was when it became so clear to me how much proving is a part of your life because you are such an ego-defined being. And then outside of your ego circuitry, you have logical collective circuitry. So there is this element of proving your logic. And I just got to say that being an ego being myself, you know, when Raw would make jokes about like, I love other ego beings, I was like, I know what he's talking about. There is this, like, I'm not worried about, well, you know, I'm never worried that I'm too much. I worry that in my presence, other people think that they're not enough. And so to be with other defined ego beings, there is this sense of like, I can just relax a little bit differently. The expectations are a little bit different. And like when I'm with other ego people, competition can be really fun. Proving can be really fun because we can, and it's part of our nature. Whereas it feels like I gotta like tuck away that little competitive side to the undefined because it's not fair for them. And well, yeah, I appreciate your ego.
Yeah, likewise, 100%, because there's this feeling wherein that dimension of the ego, of the willpower, of the what is valuable or not, of validation's importance or not, and that whole mental field, that amplification field that like 70% of people are dealing with. To be around somebody where you're not, it's not about that. Like it doesn't matter. It's cool, you know. It's
Which of
for
your
me.
ego?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Oh,
would say
you're
which
good.
of them are conscious or unconscious?
Oh, yeah. I believe in the 26, I have both conscious and unconscious. And then in the 51, I believe that is an unconscious, Venus in detriment. And then the 40, the 40 is conscious because it's my personality, Earth.
Okay, so there are aspects of you that are aware that you're an ego being, and there are other aspects of you where you can kind of like surprise yourself with your willpower.
That's a fantastic question because the whole life up until human design, I had genuinely wondered, like, do I have a big ego? Do I have a big ego, or is it this tiny thing? Because it seems like I can get over it, and yet at the same time, other times it feels gigantic, and other times it feels like a feather, like nothing. It's like, what is this thing? I don't understand.
I can
And
definitely
then,
relate to that.
ah, yeah. The thing was, is then I saw it's like, oh, okay, I see defined ego to the emotions, to the stress pressure, to the generated reality. Oh, that's a huge ego. Okay, I could be an example of that. I can do that. I believe. I believe in myself. You know, I'm hopeful.
Oh man, I'm like only having one channel myself with it being unconscious. I feel like my ego is almost like, I don't know if you've seen there's a movie out right now that my son wanted to go watch. It's called If, but it stands for Imaginary Friend. And it's almost like
Oh,
I love the movie Monsters Inc. or
oh yeah, yeah.
so I almost like my ego to me is almost like this Sully that gets let out of the closet sometimes. Like occasionally there's this like big, powerful, amazing creature that's like totally got my back, and other times I'm like, where'd he go?
Mm. Yeah, it's something that has been really fascinating for me because I have at least a little bit of that within my system as well, and I think it's mainly because of that Venus in detriment, this tendency for my ego to withdraw from shock. Like I really got to take a step back and hold on. I need to be able to make sense of this and know what the right way forward is, and then probably have at least one or two or three more times doing what I don't prefer for it to sink in, and then it's like, no, I'm here to stand up for myself, and with the four motors defined together, it's like this body has always had an autopilot. Like I'm a receptive personality. My body's strategic. There's always been an autopilot here. It's like I've always kind of been able to find my satisfaction. There was a period of time in my life where I lost, like my child. I lost my inner child for a while and I was in the world and I was upset and I didn't know what to do or where to go or what anything was. And then there was essentially yoga, and then there was human design and correct sentence structure and these systems that finally started to make sense of things and allow me to move forward. And yeah, grateful for the way life is, and also always interested to learn more about what it's like to be different because like I can't imagine having only one channel.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, truthfully, I guess I don't even see myself as a splenic projector because it's in my design and in particular Moon and Pluto. So I have the fastest moving planet and the slowest moving planet as my, or I guess, she's
Yeah,
right.
I hear what you're saying. I totally hear what you're saying. It's all good.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what to call them when you're chucking like a node and a moon and a planet and some other stuff in there. I'm like, astral being, celestial, trip over the
I'm
words,
I am personally totally okay with maintaining that Pluto is a planet. Like I don't care.
right? Okay,
That's good
now
enough.
when we left our last conversation, I was like, I really want to have a synthesis meets gate five conversation because we're
Mm.
both plant junkies, but I know it's going to come from very different places. Tell me a little bit about like I even want to split synthesis apart here, right? Because
Okay.
there's the synthesis energy, but the 19 energy is also quite different from the 49 energy. And when I think about
Mm.
like the dance that they're going to have in relation to either providing or accessing or trying to get something, like how do you feel
Mm.
about food sustainability, agriculture, like feeding the people, feeding the tribe? What comes up for you?
There's a lot. There's an there's like the it's of course it's obvious there are practical, necessary, definite importances. There are learning how to grow your own food. And in my own year of being here on an organic, sustainable homestead, essentially, practicing with the plants and in the garden directly, I've had more experience of how much is actually grown in that process of working with the plants and working with the trees. And so that as an essential quality in a fundamental practical level, to me, this is the first thing that's like definite, guaranteed important. And so I'm personally honored to be where I am and have the opportunity to do this work. And on the other hand, like right behind that, or maybe even within myself, it's before that, there is the drive and the push in such a funny way because, as I mentioned, I have a strategic design and a receptive, unconscious personality. And so for me, being, I'm across a planning. And so in a lot of my life, the idea of creating plans has been the futility of creating something that will crumble. And so part of that has been my ability to let go of the need for myself to plan out every detail or every step or exactly everything, allowing the natural vision that I was born with to see through my eyes, allowing my natural differentiation potential, my potential to become different, to look into the world and to see what it sees. And in doing so, well, it's been really challenging to say the least, because I have a hopeful motivation in a 1-3 body with a
Oh,
ton of first lines, 9 activations in the first line.
so it's like you
And
got hope sandwiched between all this insecurity and pessimism.
yeah, uh-huh. And it was terrifying for a long time. And so I would escape into like probably computers or something. And
Mhm.
the reason why I enjoyed computers and the internet and video games and technology is because, and this is in retrospect that I realized it, is that it's reliable.
Mhm.
Like I've given input and there's an output and it's like consistent. It's like, oh, I can learn here. This is something that makes sense. This makes sense. Whereas people, there was such a degree of variability and contrast and difference. It was like, I felt like a pea brain in the whole wide ocean. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to work on my one bit at a time. I'm going to process this one bit at a time and work with that. And then by the time I found myself in college, it was like, wow, people are infinitely more interesting than this technology stuff. And then I
Because
just,
their variability.
yeah, exactly. And also with these computers, the way they're built, I have learned and heard of this notion that because we have circuit boards that go in right angles everywhere, we have electrons hitting the wall and creating heat and redirecting and hitting the wall and creating heat and redirecting. Whereas if we had circuit boards made in harmonics, like phi harmonics of the golden ratio that balance into each other, we could have computers that don't create negative electrostatic fields that harm people's health.
This is so cool.
Uh, yeah. This is what I've been studying forever. It's like we finally have a place where there is literally, from my perception, there is proven knowledge that goes beyond what is accepted as proven. The thing is I can't directly communicate and demonstrate the provability of it on my own volition at a moment's notice, because we're literally talking about national security here. I've been told that if you have this free energy device, that literally we turn this thing on and it's outputting energy, it's charging our batteries, our computers don't need to be turned on, they might turn themselves on and they're running on their own. Because now it's like, boom, they have power. It's like, whoa, there's so much power going through, it's turning itself on. And the thing is if you take that thing that's angled upright and you 90-degree turn it, it becomes a high-powered rail gun that can shoot through all kinds of different things. And so it's very dangerous. And so it's hard to prove, because it's kind of important that people don't know according to the powers that be.
Okay, I can't not hear this stuff. And every time I hear anything electrical, I guess, in nature, I always think of the generator.
Hmm.
Always. I'm like, okay, so how did we put too many right
Interesting.
angles in our programming of people? Why isn't there this harmonic symmetry? If I could recalibrate sacral people so that they can turn themselves on, so that they're just turning
Yeah.
on the people around
Bing.
them, I was like, you put me next to a super pumped up sacral, I'm going to be aroused. Just there's no avoidance
Mm.
here as a projector,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, fuck,
You're
energetic
picking up on the
forces happen.
buzz.
So
Yeah.
there's a sense of like, what? Can you get a generator that you lay down and it becomes some kind of railgun? Like, how powerful can y'all get?
Oh my God. Well, I think Ross did say at one point, what is that like? Okay, no, I think it was generator. Like eventually they won't need to sleep.
I
Like
was
when they're
hoping you
so
were going to
correct.
say that. It was like the ultimate generator doesn't need, they don't need to sleep. They need to nap.
Right. Even that, I mean, I could totally see a world wherein if I was living in this perfect harmony of my own vibration, like if I was really resonating in my satisfaction, so much that I couldn't even notice frustration. Like it would try to get in and it would dissolve in the density of my satisfaction. And the first thing that happens is I'm lost because it's so beautiful, it's so blissful, it's so high. There's no what's going to happen. I don't know. I'm a receptive personality. I'm a conditioned probability.
Well, hold on. What did you say in our last episode? you need the not self sprinkling in order to like basically like not float away. Like it can never be all positive. That's you wouldn't
Hmm.
even appreciate it.
Exactly, exactly. And that's part of like being an emotional being. Like I get lost in the lack of clarity. This notion and that message, this there is no truth in the now. Like for me, I was listening to Ram Dass, be here now.
Well, and like as a
And then
splenic
to hear,
person, I can't imagine anything other than the exact truth of the moment.
right,
There's
and that's something
only
I
truth
truly
in this moment.
appreciate. Hmm. It's something that I love to be around because it's something I feel like I biomechanically do not have access to.
Mm.
My time span, it's like my time span in life. I don't have an instant right now only time span. I don't have an overall time like the Ajna determination binaries of all time. I don't have that. What I have is that's funny. What I have is this solar plexus emotional authority that gives me no truth in the now. And so the time span of that is like over a span of time. Like in this moment, I have access to relative clarity. And as I'm present with my relative clarity, it becomes greater in that sense. Because what happens is that feelings are no substitute for the clarity that I have. And so if I feel really high or feel really low or any kind of feel, that's the obvious for me now. It's more of, oh, I'm feeling this is a lack of clarity occurring. That means, whoa, hold on. This is not a place for making decisions. This is not a place for really doing big things. This is a space to take another deep breath, be present with it, because sooner or later, it'll be obvious what the next step is.
And how does it feel once we add the root center in there? Because again, we're playing with timing in a very different way. Like I know that if we were in aura together, you would control the timing of everything, which would be correct. But I would totally be like antsy and running circles around you as a splenic person in the meantime. I'd be fidgety.
Might be doing some more breath work.
Definitely.
I know that it's what I have to do. It's what I found is without breath work, without the ability to take another deep breath, I wouldn't be able to follow my inner authority. I wouldn't be able to live my type strategy. I'd probably be freaking the hell out.
Okay.
And
Now, Ra also talks about like how there's a reason that the ego is not connected to the sacral center. Your ego is connected to your sacral center, but
I
not
know, and
you. I'm
I
like, how does
wished
that be?
I wanted to have him tell me what this is. I want to hear his take because this is a generated ego situation, and he didn't say anything about it that I've heard yet. And so there might be some hidden lecture or some reading that somebody has that he gave, wherein he gave something about that. And maybe someday I'll learn about that. For now, I'm left to my own devices to be with it.
I'm like, can I look at I like to pull things apart, but then holistically put them back together again. And it's like, okay, like I'll never like okay, my personality has no definition, but I don't identify as a reflector, right? Like I'm not trying to convince myself that I've got a surprise signature or anything.
Hmm.
However, we do acknowledge that, it's your concentration channel that is the generated channel, but synthesis is a projected channel. Community is a projected channel.
And the thing is, it's really fascinating there too, because if I remember correctly, I think I've got some unconscious within the 952. However, I believe the primary is conscious, or I'm actually not even certain right now. However, the key element within my recognition of how this circuitry works for me, this ego to solar plexus to root to sacral, is that it's almost all conscious. It's almost all in the personality. The thing is that the 19 is in the sixth line of the unconscious.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, it is quite literally the fifth line of the 49 in the personality that's bridging with that. And so I have this unconscious kind of sixth line sensitivity to the needs that are around me, the needs of food and the needs of this and that, and these fundamental needs. I have kind of like an unconscious sixth line tuning into that. And the only way in which I can work with that in a good way is to be genuinely practical with my principles so that the revolution can come to fruition and not be impractical and destroyed and crumble in on itself. Because I am the first person to feel it when my principles are not practical. Gosh darn. The thing is I might not be the literal first. It could happen wherein I have given something to somebody that I would have rather not given, and then even in seeing that I've done that, I feel like I hurt myself.
I feel like it has this because the six is always just, it doesn't give a shit about the gate that it's in. It's indifferent to the gate that it's in. And so I'm like, here's this 19 that knows how to seduce for resources, but it's indifferent to its ability to be able to do that. So then
Mm-hmm.
49.5 is on the other side, and it's like, it's almost got this sense of, I know that you might be cold and you might want my jacket, but if you're not going to ask me for it, I'm probably not going to give it to you. If you're not going to appreciate it, I'm definitely not going to give it to you. And I'll only give it to you because it's practical and it's raining. But when you warm up and the sun comes out, give it back.
Practical.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This line with the 19.6, if I could even share it, this is one that I do remember. This is the line of avoidance of contact in general, but not exclusively. And so I found that one very fascinating because it's like, yeah, I've spent a lot of time like being totally okay to be in my own space. And then it's like, oh, yeah, like a one-on-one kind of thing or a small thing. It's like, yeah, great, like nice. We can actually kind of have an interaction. But you start going into the pentas and the was, and it's like, well, there's a time and a place for it. I grew up going to electronic dance parties or raves, so I have spent a lot of time in that space. And I've also spent a lot of time alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's more about having those interactions wherein we can at least approach, if not explore, communion and actually go into some depth of what is possible to reflect as consciousness through the self in this life. And that's what's the most exciting thing for me in the whole wide world, basically. It's why I love to have these conversations.
So interesting to look at, like, just the interaction with food, the interaction with nature, the interaction with plants. Like, I love I like my umbrella thing when things get more specific, more specific, more specific. It's like, here's the topic of food or nature or plants, but then you have a tribal influence, but then that tribal influence has a 6 and a 5 attached to it. And there's the need, the dependency, the resources. Like, there's so many very specific keynotes that come in to describe your relationship to this. And when I contrast that with, like, we are both people that would enjoy living on a property where we can be out in nature, but what we're doing when we're there would look quite different, because like I'm a Sun Gate 5.3. I'm a
Yeah.
5.3 in my sun and 35.3 in my earth, and those are my only third lines. So I think that there's this interesting thing with my design where I'm like, being a third line, it's part of my brand because it's such an obvious part of my personality. And yet I actually have less third lines than like every other person that I know, because it's literally only where my personality profile is. Otherwise, I'm pretty much all
Uh-huh.
4s and 6s. But this 5.3, 5 has this being in the flow of life. So when I think about 5, and I also think about the name patience or impatience, it's, am I trying to go faster than the speed of nature? If I'm trying to go faster
Mm,
than the speed of nature, I need to chill the fuck out. There's a good chance
yeah.
that I'm not self, that I'm trying too hard, especially because I'm not even sacral. So I got to be careful about this flow of nature that I'm getting
Yeah.
into. But as a
Uh-huh.
5.3, I'm destructive. A lot of people think that with gardening, you're always growing, you're always developing, you're always building. Here's the irony that I'm not sacral and I'm 5.3. So what do? Every time I come into my yard and I play with stuff, people are going, "Oh, what's your plan here? What are you doing?" And I'm like, I just ripped up this bed. I just moved these rocks. Nothing is permanent. All of my borders can be like, the rocks can be dismantled. I can extend the bed. I can put them back. Like, I learned that the point isn't to have completion. The point is to play, to dismantle, to rebuild, to go, well, what if I try it this way? How is every year I realize where the shade is in my yard, or where the sun
Mm,
hits, or where I planted something in the wrong space, or where a sunflower overgrew my vegetables and then they got too much shade, or whatever it is. But like, for me, it's being in the flow and being experimental is this ability to like co-create with nature without being responsible for it.
mm. I love that.
It's so regulating to me to be like just barefoot and dirty in the garden. If if I didn't have to make money, that's what I would do.
Mm. Hmm.
If people wanted to just sit with me in the garden and like show me their body graph while I just talked and like weeded and did random things, like, and I don't doubt that the world is coming to that place. One of the things that I've noticed is that as much as online is still very, very busy for me, there is a development of people in my in-person
Mm.
life, which is so
Uh-huh.
cool because I mean, everything kind of went to shit when we went into COVID lockdown, and we're a lot
Yeah.
really alone, and a lot of our relationships really changed. And I transitioned to losing most of my personal relationships that were
Mm.
not self, and then
Hmm.
developing online relationships that were more recognizing, but also impersonal because you can't see each other that often. And
True.
so now it's like there's a better blend, but I really think that like we're going to naturally shift back to regionalism and being local and being in our communities. And
Right. I appreciate that too, because I feel like it brings it back into some questions and direction you may have been going towards previously. This notion of, well, something that I think we're all seeing, at least those of us who are in the design field and experimenting, is perhaps this movement towards the decentralization, is one of my favorite words for it. Because I have seen so many, well, and it's funny because I got that third line unconscious. So there is a form of pessimism that's a part of what I am. And yet it's in my body. It's not in my personality. What my personality is this so extraordinarily deeply hopeful thing that is now learning how to embrace its own pessimism, its own darkness, and how to communicate from that and be more vulnerable, which has been challenging and it is rewarding as well. And so, with this decentralization movement, this is something that I think is such a key word because I've seen so many people that are like, no, we're going like back to the Stone Ages. We're about to lose all technology. We're going to lose all the internet. It's all going downhill. You're going to have to farm for your own food. So many people are going to kill each other. It's all going to go to hell. And it's like, you got to be ready for that. And I'm like, well, I think. I think this time what's happening is that we made a bunch of movies and cartoons and shows to do that. Like that's where we did that. And here in the real world, where we're proving our lives and we're living for real, I believe those of us that are alive, we have this chance to participate in this life that can unfold within our lifetimes that goes beyond the wildest dreams of our imagination. It goes beyond what we could have strategically planned to create. It becomes this thing wherein literally I am not responsible for this. And because I accepted that, it was able to become something far greater than I ever could have done myself, or that we could have done ourselves because we strategically planned every single little detail. Like, I believe the reason why the seven centered, purely strategic human, the classic Homo sapien, is essentially extinct. I mean, I guess theoretically it's possible there could be a few more hiding out there somewhere, which would be interesting. And yet they're basically extinct. And I believe that's because their work has been done. And I believe their work was ajna domination. It was the binary, the absolutism of duality. And so now we have this chance for the solar plexus to become the dominant awareness, to become something that's here. And it's because we have gone through the spleen. We've gone through these bodies that are simply alive right now, feasting and famine and whatever happens, they're simply alive. We've gone through those, and there's so many animals living there right now. And then we had the classical Homo sapien who lived through all the logic and all the strategies that were possible, and they really developed those to the highest height. And then they found at the very top, whoa, receptivity is the best. That's the
Mhm.
highest strategy possible. And now the genetics started to give that to us in a unique blend of strategic and receptive. And now that we have this unique blend, the old school strategies don't work anymore. And we still have a few more years. The cross of planning is still here in the global background frequency. So well, the narcissistic entities of business are still supported by the background frequency for a few more years. And my belief is that once we've shifted out of that, the support from Earth, from Mother Earth and the sun, the stars, and the heavens is no longer there for those corporations because their work will have been done. And so what is now time to flourish at that point are these decentralized interactions where like say I was born in Alaska. And then I left Alaska because I was able to come across a large sum of money that allowed me to comfortably go, okay, I am out of here. I need to shift. And I bought a one-way ticket to Hawaii. And I spent a month with a friend of mine in Hawaii because I was looking for yoga. I was looking for a teacher. And then, boom, I saw Sadhguru's inner engineering course. And then, oh, the final class is in person in California. I guess I have to go to California. I have an aunt and uncle in California. I guess I'll ask them and see if I could stay there for a bit. And then I, well, I put myself in massive credit card debt in order to become a yoga teacher trainer. And then I found out I don't have gate 21. So even though I got a 45 and everything else in the ego, I don't like to tell people what to do. I don't like to be there and breathe in, breathe out, do this, do that. I don't control in that way. I don't have access to control. So I was able to get over the psychological hurdles of being in front of people and realize, oh, I guess I'm not here to lead classes like that. Okay, what's next? What's next? And part of that is this realization of that one-on-one connection. Because when I'm one-on-one with somebody, or even in a small group, like it's anything could happen. It's as soon as something gets into this strategic container that constricts my receptive personality into being a strategic creature. I can only tolerate so much of that before I start to lose my bearings and I start to lose balance and I start to make mistakes. And it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean, oh, no, oh. And so I can be strategic, I have a strategic body, and yet my personality can only handle so much strategy before it starts to lose its bearings. And that goes hand in hand with my undefined crown center because it's like, it's a wide open crown center. So it's like, what does matter? What doesn't matter? It's all inspiration. Am
You
I
give
being
me
mentally
so
fulfilled?
many
Am I
things
satisfied? Yeah,
to
yeah.
talk about. Like, there are so many things that you just unloaded to talk about. And
Okay, okay. Sorry. Hope it's not too much.
no, no, it's good. I mean, I like this for myself, and that means I know I like it for my audience because I want
Mm.
them to hear the conversations I enjoy having. But there aren't too many people that are going to maintain a conversation with me that is more cosmology based.
I love
Um,
cosmology. It's so good.
Me too, because it feels like the fantasy side of human
Mm.
design. Like it's almost like the fantasy fiction side because I always acknowledge the fact that I don't know if this is true. I'm not in the future. Like,
Right? Who
blast
knows
me
if we're actually going to have rave
forward so I can
children?
meet a baby that has a compressed solar plexus wave. Like, I don't know what that's like yet. I'm only speculating on what I've heard, but they're the best stories.
Yes. Best stuff I ever heard, best sci-fi I ever heard about, and I'm so happy that I can participate in the potential of witnessing it within my lifetime.
It makes me so optimistic. Like when people talk about when they don't understand what's coming and it's like the raves, like when they make the rave sound like bad, don't get me
Oh,
wrong. I'm not terribly ignorant. I'm not totally ignorant of like the potential damage that could happen, but I see this very much as I am not afraid of being hurt in any way by the coming rave as long as I don't try to hurt them. That's what
100%.
I'm taking into this. If I am threatening, then I will be inviting consequences, but that will be my fault. There's nothing
Yep.
I've come across that says that they're threatening. There's stuff I've come across that says they're powerful, and we hear that and we get weird about it.
You know, that's It's honestly one of my favorite words in the entire dictionary, this word weird. Do you know the original etymological meaning of the word weird?
No.
Well, what the word weird actually means, first off, it's spelled with a Y, W-Y-R-D,
Okay.
weird. And what I will say as my closure on what the word means is that it is essentially the ability to either guide, control, determine, influence fate itself. So the weird is that which can influence fate or control fate or adjust fate. Like, oh, that's so weird. How could it do that?
That to me sounds like individual and mutative.
Yes. That's why I love etymology. It's like, hold on, there are a lot of codes and keys lying around everywhere that we have forgotten, and it's because we said them so many times in the wrong way.
I get really fascinated with language, and I'm certain that it is because my only channel is a channel of a transmitter. I feel like I'm a version of Google Translate in existence.
Mm.
When words are coming through me, especially with my taste cognition, if if I can tell that my audience has a different definition or that's not how they take, like,
Ooh.
that feels like my projected channel's gift is the ability to deliver the information the way that the other person needs to receive it in order to understand it.
Mm. That's my practice. As a 1648, I'm like, okay, I'll try again. I'll try again. I'll try again. I'll try again. I'll try again.
See, yours is like, it's got to make all this logical sense. Mine is like, just manipulate a little and they'll get
Yeah.
it.
And I've got the 26, both in the conscious and the unconscious. So it's in there, except for there's no 44 to really sink it into the awareness on the other end. That's a wide split. Oh, no, that's my simple split then, because the 44 is a simple. 44 would bridge the gap for me, same as the 21.
44 is a pain in the ass because, well, 26 has got this really beautiful marketing side. It comes across, I think, as like really confident when it doesn't have that 44. But as soon as you plug it into the 44, all of my marketing really comes from this internal fear that the past is going to repeat itself and it's going to result in tribal death. So
Yeah.
there's this kind of uncomfortable part.
Sure, that uncomfortable though, that's what gives you the nuanced awareness of how to manipulate it for success so that they can have something that's better for them because you're actually able to convince them. With
God,
my 26, with my 26 situation, it's more like, okay, for the 100 millionth time, I'll try again and hopefully you won't think that I'm trying to swindle you. Because I have had so many people who think, well, maybe not so many, but I have had people, and with a 54 in the sixth line as my Neptune misinformation field of the personality, I've had a lot of people who talk shit on my ambition and the way in which I communicate about that ambition and the things I select and the things I do in that way. And so people who I would otherwise be like, yeah, that's actually a reasonable, cool, or intelligent person. And then I talk to them a little bit about human design. And oh, I accidentally began the conversation with dark matter crystals filtering neutrinos. And oh, I'm a crystal woo woo con artist salesman. Dang it. How do I get out of that?
okay, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but sometimes I have these moments where I look at my own work or my own topics of conversation, and I have this moment where I wouldn't call it disconnected from myself in any way, but it's like I watch me in this separated kind of way. And I'm
Okay.
just like, man, I would never watch me. I would never listen to shit. Like, what is this hippie fucking weirdo talking about? Like, and truthfully, I genuinely feel this way all the time. I open my own Instagram
Oh,
and I'm like,
yeah.
who's into this? Like, which tells me that I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing, not because I even want
Right.
what I'm doing, right? Like it's
Exactly.
I do it, but then I can't think about it afterwards. It's like chucking a bomb and running because like when I watch my intro to human design video, I'm just like, what? If you had shown this to me at other points in my life, I'd be like, well, what is this whack job doing? When I get comments that are like, this girl has mental health problems, I'm like,
Yeah.
sometimes I do. I'm ADHD diagnosed. I've got all kinds of pills. Like, I don't take them often unless it's a panic, but I'm
Oh, that's
wondering,
hilarious. I love that.
yeah,
I appreciate that. I love that because, like, for me, when I get hater mail like that kind of stuff, I've started to thank them, and then they'll still be upset. They'll be mad that I've thanked them because, oh yeah, typical creator response. Thank you for the participation, and I'm like, yeah, genuinely, thanks. I hope you're having a good day.
yeah.
Because the thing is, well, so my third line is in the unconscious, and I got a first line in the conscious. And something that I learned that really blew my mind open and helped me to find more stability in my field was Ra's talks on fate.
Okay.
So, learning how the first line and how the third line meet with fate in a good way. And so I got the third line unconscious. The third line is bumping up against the limits, pushing things towards mutation always. It's not trying to finish anything. It's this eternal unfolding towards perfection, always making mistakes and, getting closer and closer and closer to attunement with the material world to the point where, yeah, I know this stuff better than anybody because I'm a third line. And that's what we do is we figure this stuff out better than anybody else. And it's not to judge anybody else as lesser or anything. It's just to be like, we are here to attune to the material world and what is literally going on. And that's in my unconscious. And so the way in which the third line meets with fate is basically acceptance or resignation. Like, yep, that's what happens. That's happened. Okay, I can work with that. It's all good. I can get up again. 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 Bonds made and broken and made and broken and made and broken. I can get up again. And then there's the first line. And this is where I have the most energy geometrically in that sense. I got 9 activations in the first line and maybe it's 3 or something in the third line. I don't know. The 3 is very few. It's mostly 5 and 6 behind the first. I got 6 5s and 5 6s for those keeping score. And so this first line meets with fate in a good way through composure. Like if I lose my cool, if I lose track and I start freaking out, things can really go downhill and it can get really weird and ugly and stupid and wrong. And it's like, how the hell did I get here? What did I do? What was that? Oh, I lost my cool and I said something that I would have not said in awareness because I behaved out of feelings instead of waiting for clarity. And that's basically the biggest lesson I had in my entire life is getting in touch with that. And since beginning that journey of waiting for clarity and revoking decision making from my conscious thinking mind, because that thing, no matter how smart it thinks it is not designed to make decisions for this body. That is self abuse. That is hate. That is not letting yourself live your life. And when I recognized that, it was like, oh, okay, well, it's actually a relief because this receptive personality was sick and tired of trying to be strategic. And so I can take a break from that a little bit. I can allow my body to live its life, knowing that my mind is not here to make decisions for my body. My mind is here to observe life. It is here to measure and make calculations and inferences and deductions and whatever else it likes to do to contemplate the future, the past, the present, whatever. And it's here to share what it has seen and calculated with others. One, two, and three. That's what the mind is here to do that I see. That's what I see it's here to do. And my mind being able to recognize that and go, okay, well, I hear you. I hear you. It seems that things actually go a little better when I'm not the one telling you what to do. It seems that when I stop telling you what to do, things work out a little better. So I'm gonna try and relax a little bit. And then, oh, what about that one? It looks really good. Let's go. Let's just go crazy. And so it doesn't stop. Like Ross said, it doesn't stop being the mind. It doesn't stop being the not self. It simply no longer is a controlling dictator that you listen to or that you take seriously. You can see it like, yep, it's cloudy overhead. That doesn't mean I'm gonna start bawling and punch myself in the face because it's raining. It's the weather. Who cares? Enjoy it.
You said a phrase that brought so much other information in for me. You said self-abuse.
Mm.
And I'm going to riff for a second in that strategy and authority is the point of this. It's that we can be our own authority. But in order
Mhm.
to be your own authority, you have to see yourself as able to be your own authority. That requires self-love, self-respect, self-belief, tenacity, a determination, a willingness. Like there's so much required in order to actualize your own authority. Now, when I think about the keynotes of the five, if I think about universalization and
Mm.
guilt, and I think about the victim, when I am in a victim place, I know I'm not holding the frequency of being my own authority because I'm coming from a place of what is unpleasant in my life is someone else's fault. And I'm not saying that there's no one else that's blameless or, has consequence or anything.
Mm.
But one of the things that I've been, and I know that this is sometimes really hard for my clients, but it's also why they're coming to me, the directness of my ego in certain ways.
Yeah.
And, I really call people to look at the ways in which they are their biggest abuser. When you start to take responsibility for the ways in which you're abusing yourself, that's one of the fastest ways to get your power back. Because if we're putting all this blame on other people, like you hurt me, and it's like, okay, well, what happens when you tell yourself that you hurt yourself? How do you expect
Yeah.
yourself to pay for consequences, or how to have more awareness, or to change your behavior on something? There were so many ways in which I recognized I was abusing myself. And with 7 undefined centers, there are 7 rooms that I go into to have negative sessions with myself.
Uh-huh.
And the excavating of these not self qualities has brought me to such a place of regulation. And the
Mm.
byproduct of this is my signature tenfold. I've been thinking about this so much because I'm really in my signature right now. But 4 months ago, I was really trying to be in my signature. And that was so different because it was performance based. And I was either a good girl or a bad girl. And other people in the human design community could tell me whether I was a good girl or a bad girl living my human design right and all of this shit.
Uh-huh.
But now I'm in a place where it's like, if I if I get anxious and it's like I have to have the right answer, it's like, no, you don't. And that's the end of that conversation. It's like I learned how to not argue with myself as the higher version of me, the higher potential of me. Like the real projector in me is so strong now that I can look at like previous smaller projector version of me, and she's like this cute little child I'm taking under my wing now. She's not wrong, she's not bad, but she's not as mature as she had the potential to be. And now that we're in that place, there's a sense of like, as long as I'm very aware of not letting my not self abuse me in those 7 undefined rooms,
Mhm.
there's no other thing than my signature.
Right. And that's why I think he said it's so valuable. It's why he made such a big flippin' deal about type strategy and inner authority, saying it 100,000 times over, like, follow your strategy and authority. Yeah. I mean, because I honestly, when I hear that, when I hear follow your strategy and authority, I hear exactly what you said. This, when I stop participating in these rooms of self abuse, these what I call black holes of misinformation, these fields in which I could get lost forever and I could keep pushing that button forever and ever and ever. And in my experience, it was I could make myself more and more sad. I could infinitely become more and more sad. And then eventually I recognized, hold on a second. It feels like I could do this forever. And if I could spiral negatively and make myself more and more sad, does that not mean the opposite is also possible? And I could spiral upward towards bliss and joy and love and happiness and peace and success and satisfaction and surprise and all these wonderful things. And I could figure out what that means. I could figure out the difference in the thought form patterns between this and that. And I could figure out how to stop being so dang depressed. It's like the taste of depression was like, I think I've had enough. And not simply like I've had enough for myself. It felt like a tribal, like my 45. It's like I feel like we've had enough. This
Yeah.
sadness, this depression, this suffering. It's like it has served its purpose. We can let go of this now. We can move on and be happy people on the world alive today. And my life's mission basically became figuring that out as a science so that I could stop experiencing depression and I could experience bliss and joy and happiness and love. And then also that I could communicate it and teach it to other people as a skill, as a thing they could participate with consciously and go that direction so that they don't have to experience so much sadness and depression and frustration and anger and all that other stuff. Because I figured it's like, it's possible, we can do this. And like that was back when I was part of a very specific sect of Buddhism called well, they were followers of the Nichiren Daishonin, which is called the Soka Gakkai, was the organization of them. Nichiren or Daishonin was the name or title of the person who in this sect was considered the Buddha of the time. And the message was Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound. So we'd be hanging out together going, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And I remember it was in that group was the first time I shared that story of, yeah, I got tired of being depressed and I wanted to figure out how to be happy. And it's like mantras, that's a nice mantra. I like that mantra. That one feels good. I'm going to sing it. We're going to hang out. And then, the whole thing unfolds from there. There's so many more steps from here to Timbuktu.
Even there, I'm like, I hear the sound, I hear the frequency, I hear the conditioning, I hear how quickly we can change. Like, I mean, vibe is such a funny word, but vibe really means frequency to me, right? Like you can change that vibe, and yet it's not the pinnacle to me. Anything that is a five still has one more level to go. And I'm like,
Yeah,
you
five is
didn't
such a
get
trap.
there.
Five was such a strategic trap.
But
At least,
so when you left, when you were no longer part of this Buddhist sect, is it because you needed further differentiation? Like what came next?
what happened? Well, yeah, the reason why I ended up leaving is I recognized well, there were not self problems in the organization. And the only way for me to continue participating would be to rise up to the top and to completely flip everything from the inside out myself. And I went, you know what? I can let sleeping dogs lie. I need to live my life. I need to live my life. Like, there's so much
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay, you ever meet, well, that was going to be a stupid sentence. You ever see, we all see, and we see it all the time, the people that are like, I'm bringing in a new paradigm. And I'm like,
Wow,
really?
really?
You changed the incarnation cross that we're all experiencing? Good for you.
Right, you turned the
No, I'm
wheel?
gonna usher in this
Wow.
new paradigm. And I'm like, we're literally all doing it. We're
Right, we're
all alive right now.
almost there.
The paradigm is changing.
Right. It was this release of control, this release of vanity, really, this perception that we are the ones in charge making all the decisions, like recognizing, oh, hold on. Okay. So the reason why we're still basically killing the earth for profit, to put it nicely, is because the cross of planning is still here. We still have a background frequency that supports. We've made these agreements. It doesn't matter if they're ugly. We've made these agreements as people. We've made all kinds of these agreements. And the background frequency supports it. I scratch your back, you scratch my back, and we all get along, kind of, sort of, except for those who are on the other side, and they get to deal with it. And that's the old bargain. And so I'm across a planning myself. I truly feel like I am here because I am able to see and recognize and cognize the fact that there is a jewel at the end of the cross of planning. There is something truly beautiful at the height of all this polarity. There is something beautiful that we can take and we can, decentralize it. we can turn it into something that is interdependent. We are no longer codependent. We are no longer simply dependent. We are interdependent. I depend upon you for this. You depend upon me for that. And each of us depends upon other people for different things. And they depend upon other people for different things. And we don't have to worry about what Facebook is going to censor because we trust each other and we don't need them because them is another word for penta. We forget
Like
so many little details and
I really feel that tribal, and I definitely feel that like that tribal connection with you. Like I,
mm,
as long as there are like dependency doesn't make me feel bad. A lot of people
no.
don't like the word dependency. They're like, oh, that's bad. I'm a mom. Like I love that my child is dependent on me. I'm gonna really feel a loss when he's no longer dependent on me. I'm only afraid of dying in case my son wants to be dependent on me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. The power of being a mother and a parent. I mean, that's one thing that by the grace of the gods, it's one thing that hasn't happened to me. It was like, no, this guy, if this guy was to have a kid, he wouldn't be able to get his work done. He's got to have his heart broken real strong and hard so that he can do his work.
I have a dark sense of humor, and I'm doing up my will right now
Oh,
so that
yeah.
when I
Yeah.
die, I'm left to go through my Bardo experience. Um,
Yes. Very
because
good.
I'm like, I totally want to reincarnate as like one of my own grandkids. I want to like
Right
be
on.
I want to be stuck to my son. I want to be like one of his grandkids or something.
Oh yeah, it's like how'd you do? Yeah.
Yeah, while having, no awareness that I pulled it off. Like maybe we were already together
Who
last time and I don't
knows?
even know.
By the time our kids or our kids' kids, the people in our generation have children and those children's children. I mean, we according to the story, we only got like 1,300 years left here, and I don't know that there's a book. I do not know the name, and that's something that's very profound for me because this book was so important that I actually made at least one, two, or three copies of this book that I printed and put into binders that are like this big because it's a story wherein somebody was in one of the first world wars and they got knocked out and they woke up at like what was it, um 3100 something, like 3000 something, like right before when Ra's prophecy would say life on earth ends, within maybe 100 or 1,000, yeah, within like 100 or 2 years or something like that. And this person woke up in the future and they had a whole experience and the society was very different. One thing I could say is that work was this is funny. I'm kind of forgetting if it was either like a 2 week or a 2 year stint where basically like when you turned 18 or 21 or something like that, you spent like a few weeks or a few years working and then you got to retire and you got to live your life, you got to live your life because we'd solved the problems and we had groups of people that were like high mages essentially who were deep into the metaphysical balance holding that line, and people were living to their like 30s 40s and 50s with the innocence of an 8-year old, and things were very different. And the thing was is I never even got to finish the book because this guy is like pining over a girl in the future the whole time, and it's like, tell me about the society. Stop like lamenting about this woman whose feelings you hurt or whatever. Like, tell me about the future. I want to. And so I had a hard time reading it, and I don't even remember the name of it. And yet the thing was is he woke up back after. So he was in the future before the collapse of society, before life leaves Earth. And then he came back and woke up from that world war at some point and wrote the book. This is what I saw in the future. This is what happened to me.
Okay, this is interesting because I also have a book that I cannot remember the name of that's like real thick. And this guy's story is that in those like moments of waking up really early in the morning when you're in that kind of lucid state, without realizing it, one time he went into a lucid state and Noah is the name. I'll be able to find this book now knowing that character's name. But he wakes up and his consciousness is being carried around by this man named Noah. and he can communicate with Nanoa's consciousness and see through his eyes. And this
Hmm.
is in the future. It's
Yeah.
around the 3000 mark. And
Interesting.
Nanoa, when you go to Nanoa's perspective in the book, Nanoa is also waking up in the morning in the lucid state, and sometimes this voice comes into his head or it doesn't. So he has no control over when the voice comes in. The other guy doesn't know how he's getting into Nanoa's consciousness, but when he can see through his lens, he's in America, but they talk about how like it's like folktale that it's even called this. The coastline has changed. A
Mm.
group of people floated from Hawaii to the coastland on this like huge raft boat thing and
Mm.
resettled on the mainland. Occasionally they find these like artifacts in these old, like the old civilization is gone and it's only folklore at this point, where occasionally they find things. Everything is regional. There's tribes people, there's like a lot of exchanging. So there's this, it's this return to something, but it still also has this advanced quality to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the societal structure that changes quite a bit. And I wouldn't just call it magic, but there is this mystical element that comes in a different way.
Yes.
But it's not God, it's not monotheistic religion based anymore. And this was right before I got into human design, and it's when I was trying to
Oh.
shamanic journey. Um,
Mm.
but I've done a little bit of that to know that there is other stuff to experience, but it's the return to regionalism. Like I can't get that
Mm.
phrase, return to regionalism, out of my head. And that's where I see like it lines up with what Ra's talking about. The only thing I haven't found in this kind of fiction is what might be symbolized as the raves.
Hmm. It has me thinking of this book story one of my friends here on the mountain has told me about, and I may be able to read sooner or later. I think it's The Kin of Ata. And they were saying these people sound like rave children.
Ooh,
And so I'm looking forward to reading that book sooner or later.
let me know
The
how it
Ki-
goes.
yeah, for sure. The Kin of Ata. I mean, it sounds interesting. Very cool to me. And, and that what you were saying, Nanoa, it almost has me going, is that the same book even? Did we find, because it almost makes me think of what I was talking about. Like it could be very similar. And at the same time, I don't know if I heard anything about Hawaii like that. However, I think that's a very cool notion because from my studies of various things, I have, mm, like what happened in here in the Americas, North America, when it was colonized, basically, what happened to the natives, and how that basically happened in Hawaii, and how we don't learn that in school here in the West. They don't tell us about that. They show partying with the natives eating turkey.
Yeah, the Thanksgiving story.
Yeah, and just the horrors that have happened in that have allowed us to exist and allowed us to have our lives and the ability to be with that darkness and not to simply shut it out and also not to take it on as another opportunity to suffer, because what you were saying earlier, this shifting into this next stage wherein perhaps there's still this mysticism and yet it's not the same monotheistic god of the past.
Yeah.
It has me thinking of this notion of something that might be a book I may write one day about the emergence of the Trinity, essentially. And it's the three awareness centers, fundamentally, and a motion of the evolution of consciousness. How we essentially stem from the spleen, we stem from the instant, the big bang, the splash, the right now, the poof, the instinctual cleansing of this moment, this refreshing of this moment, this presence in this moment. And that's the spleen. We have this right now. And then from there, we evolved into the binary, from the oneness into the binary, into this duality of left and right and wrong, up and down, forward, backwards, strategic values. And what happens is, what I see is happening is that now that we have evolutionarily completed the binary on the fundamental level, like there's still more to unfold. And the thing is now we have the chance for that singularity of the spleen, for the oneness of the spleen to emerge after the binary. And what could possibly be after duality? Well, we have non-duality, where instead of is it black, is it white? Well, it's actually both and neither, because the truth is something behind that which allows black and white, red, orange, yellow, all these colors to exist. And when we start to recognize, oh, the truth is what allows all these differences to exist, like your truth, my truth, somebody else's truth, everybody else has their own individual relative truth, and it's allowed by the absolute truth, which is what allows all the relative truths to exist. And it's a simple logical construct that allows you to see, oh, hey, there is something which is completely beyond the ability to conceive of it. At least that's like a general claim about it, and it could be thought of, and that sentence was proof of it. It was proof that what I had said a moment ago was basically a lie, or is a fifth line universalization, which is such a thing because those fifth line universalizations, I came to discover after listening to hours of Raw, there is always an exceptions to every single universalization. They are not absolute. I don't care how certain you are. It doesn't matter. You could be certain and be wrong.
Yeah, Ross says be with your own type. Sameness is the future. And yet he was married to a generator.
Right. It's like, yep. He was deeply not self. I mean, he was one of the most powerfully strategic not selves in the whole wide world. He had that $1 million contract with the Canadian government to make a rock and roll music video. And then he grabs a bunch of acid, takes some money out of a suitcase, and bails.
Yeah.
I mean,
Pure individual. Do my own thing. Go my own way.
yeah. Exactly. And his story, he's like crying on the way there. He's like sitting somewhere, like crying, like, oh my God, why am I crying? Am I crazy?
Like it
It,
it kills me that Raw's not tribal. Like I had to get
oh,
over so much of my own I was just mad at him for leaving his family. I was mad for
mm,
like his other divorces, his kids that he's like, I don't talk to their mom and whatever. I was just like, oh man, it
mm.
must be hard to be part of your family and hear some of the stories that you've told afterwards.
Oh yeah, or his old business partners and how many people he burned the bridge with in a not so good way.
Yeah.
I've heard about this, and it's like, oh, yep, I believe it. He was not a kind man, you know? He
Yeah.
grew
Like
into it
not
a little bit.
necessarily not not proud maybe of some of the choices. And yet at the same time, if he didn't do that and he didn't land at design,
So much more suffering.
exactly.
And
I actually
that's
really love knowing that Raw ended up with a generator because if he was too rigid and perfect in his own rules, the system it wouldn't work. Like the
nope.
dogma would be it would have become a cult. It would be way too also, I get such a kick out of when people are like, is human design a cult? And I'm like,
Literally
all
the
right, just
anti-cult.
yeah, tell me who the leader is. If you can tell me who we all agree is the leader, I might buy into this, but there's no leader. He died. And the point was to be your own leader.
Mhm. As literally, mechanically, fundamentally, logically, it is the exact opposite of what a cult is. A cult is the following of outer authority at the expense of your own life, whereas human design is following inner authority. It's
The
completely
only
different
time human
mechanically.
design is a cult is if you are in your first couple of years in a pop HD community. If you find
Precisely, and
yourself in
you're
a community, you're in trouble.
oh my God. Well, that was so funny because I was introduced to human design by this community, I could call it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's so profound about it for me is like the person who is kind of spearheading their process, 6'2", you know? And then they had this 5'1" who was hanging out and they were good friends. And then, like, as a 1-3, I show up and gosh darn, the power of that aura. If we could have, if there was, if it, if things were different, they wouldn't be the same. But the thing about that aura, like that, there was the 6'2", the 5'1", the 1-3. It's like we had the entire universe at our disposal. Everything was right there. And the thing was is it wasn't stable. It wasn't able to really stick in that sense. And so for whatever reason, we didn't end up, like, I'm not still part of that same community, and yet they're like family to me. They're like deep in my soul and my heart and who I am, and yet I haven't seen them in years and we hardly talk anything.
Yep.
And yet they're right here in my heart, you know, all the love in the world, because like no matter what happens, and this was something I learned most first precisely from the 6'2" who introduced me, is Victoria, and she was the first person on my podcast here because, you know, we're still friends. And the thing is no matter what happened and how things played out, I could never stay upset at somebody for being their own authority and for being true to themselves. It doesn't matter what was happening and how unfair or unjust I could imagine I was treated. When the clarity arrived of they're living their life, dude, like, get over it. It's like, oh shit, it's always been my fault. I could always do better. You see, because as a simple split, it was never somebody else's fault. It was always, I could do better. I could do better. I can do better. I can do better. Of course I could do better. I know, oh, look at that. That was horrible. I could do better than that. And so, like with this first line personality, I maintain composure. I watch this third line bounce around and do all kinds of different things in the 1648, pulling from the depths. And if my water is dirty, ooh, something nasty could come out of me. But I keep myself clean and pure. You know, I breathe. It doesn't mean that I never do this or I never do that. It's not like it's not like a form of abstinence or fasting wherein I can't eat. It's being able to be with my discipline. And this is something I'm learning a lot being here on this sustainable community, is my ability to step into discipline. Because as an ego being, I've been able to get away with the minimal discipline. And so now I'm in a place that is calling me to the front, because it's like, hey, it's time. Like, let's do our work. And it's like, at first, it's, ugh, work. Wait a minute. This is my work. This is the real work. Of course, yes, let's do the work. However, there's still that little bit of inertia, that little bit of hangover from I'm clever, I'm a clever person, and I can put in the work when I have to, like as an ego being, I feel like I'm very energetically conservative. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do use the minimal energy so that when I need it, it's there and I can do what I need to do. And so being here in this space to other people who are deep in their process and deep in their practice and yet completely different from me, that could appear like, well, it seems like you're lazy. It seems like you don't have discipline. It seems like you're not really ready to show up. It seems like you're not here to do your work. And so for me, I heard that. People were telling me that. People that are close to me were telling me that. And I'm like, shit, sacred, healthy, intimate teachings. Shit, I can actually grow up now. It's time to start really maturing here, because I'd been getting away with less discipline than is really necessary
Well,
to
that
really live a good, strong life.
that concept of like, are we working enough? Are we being lazy? Like, so many people like react to a question like that, like, am I being lazy? And I'm like, I need to dismantle the question for a second. Like, if somebody is lazy, that implies that there's a standardized level of
Hmm.
productivity that is a given, which we know that with differing energy types that's not a thing.
Uh-huh.
Generators will call other generators lazy because there's the not self expectation that generators become manifestors. But then generators take that expectation and they look at projectors or reflectors and they're like, well, where are you guys putting your energy? And I'm over here like, we should all be probably half as productive at most as we're all trying to be. Like, I think that we've doubled what we think is necessary or good or healthy. And truly, if I could make it like if I could program everybody and I could mute anybody's ability to use the word lazy unless they were a projector talking to a sacral being. That's it.
Oh.
Because who can actually read your energy and determine whether or not you're using it the right way or not?
Right.
Much of this is coming from the mind, the not self, the victimizing, the needing to like punish ourselves.
I
Most
mean, it's
people.
like you're literally born to do that work as a projector. You're born to see into my G center and into my orchestrating monopole and see into my energy and know, like, hey, are you using your energy well or not?
Yeah, I'm like, if people were to come to me and be like, I feel like I'm lazy because I'm not, I'm like, you're doing too much, actually. You're making me nauseous. Like, you're kind of making my head spin. Maybe you need to chill. Maybe you need to, like,
Mhm.
I would love to see people be half as productive as we are.
I do 100% agree with you. And I feel like the level of nuance at which we're communicating is a lesson that, well, it's something like you're saying, if you can click the button and give it to people and change it, it's like, of course, like, please, let's get over this stuff now. Let's usher in the new age. I am
We're bringing the paradigm. It's our
Ex-
responsibility.
exactly, exactly. That's the joke. It's such a good joke. It's why I love it. It's why the vanity becomes something you can actually appreciate. Like, oh, I could laugh at myself. I thought I was in control. Oh, global warming's my fault. Oh, no, it's to make the rave children. We have to. We have to shift this stuff up and bring it out and change all this stuff because otherwise the consciousness wouldn't evolve.
And just that, I'm like, knowing that the earth has to heat up for the genetic mutations that are happening, that means I can't participate in a conversation where I go, these five families are controlling this, that are turning up and it's bad, and I need to go, you need to recycle. It's like, I'm innocence motivation. I can't tell you to do anything. I can only lead myself here. So I'll do my recycling or I won't. But I'm pretty sure being my own authority is better for the planet than this pop can going in the right spot.
Damn straight. Like I started to learn and integrate this message and this recognition that, hey, I'm a generator. There's there's a bunch of us. Most human beings are generators. And the reason this world suffers is because generators are generating a field of frustration and everybody else has to deal with it.
Yeah.
As a generator, it's like, gosh darn, I'm here to be satisfied. And I exist in the satisfaction. And in doing so, I'm able to radiate that and generate a field of satisfaction. And so I don't have to logically correct everybody and say you're wrong because I'm right. I can live in satisfaction and you can go, dang, you look satisfied. I can go like, yes, you want to share? You want some? I'm overflowing.
My thing that comes out the most based on my own mechanics is like being defined ego, defined spleen. It's like there's very direct communication, knowing what to let go of, plus the third line profile. For me, I can't help but look at a sacral person and go, do you really want to do that? Like, that's the number one question that comes out of me of like, because I always recognize when they're doing something they don't have a response for. And
Mm,
that to me is so uncomfortable because if they're expecting themselves to do something they don't have a response for, then they're definitely also expecting me to be not self performative. And that's uncomfortable for me. So, in order to not have that pressure on me, I immediately am like, does that feel good for you? Do you like,
yeah, and as a
do you want more of that?
I have to say, as a generator, I appreciate hearing that from a projector. That it's like that's the first thing, is because I have been around plenty of projectors. To say the least, I have found myself as a generator attracted to a lot of projectors. And then I found, hey, they don't respond.
When they're boring.
And then sometimes, like, one of my last good relationships was with a 1/4 splenic, ego, unemotional projector. And, well, 1/4, my third line was rubbing up all on that four. And the four is like, come on, like, we could get, shush. And I'm like, quarter of initiation. Let's stimulate our minds. Let's talk about everything. And then it's like, shush. I'm quiet in the mornings. I'm slow to wake up. Shush. And there was all this love from the first lines. We shared that first line, beauty. It's amazing. It's all full of awe. And then the unconscious is rubbing up against each other in the wrong way in such a way that it's like, no, we can't get over this. This is fundamental, non-compatible at this level. This literally mechanically does not work.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to see that and to honor that within ourselves, each other, because it's like we both really tried, you know, we were both upset, we were both having a bad time.
The mind in the quarter of initiation. I'm like, ooh,
Yeah.
I'm the quarter of mutation. And there's a band I really love called Stars. And one of the lyrics in their songs is, "Do you want to die together?" And it's like that's
Oof.
their romantic song. They're saying it over and over again. And I'm like, that's fucking
Yeah.
quarter of mutation. I'm like, I wanted that, and plus purely tribal on
Yeah.
top of that too. I'm like,
Right. I mean, it makes sense to me. Being able to die together, that's like a height. That's a very big height because what I found with my system, you know, avoidance of contact in general, but not exclusively. And I might not be a 6-line profile, and yet there's the theme of that 6 line, soulmate or not.
mm-hmm.
And so it either really is or it really isn't. And being able to allow that within myself. I've been single a lot of my life for most of my experience because it's like I literally don't have the energy to care if it doesn't improve my life. If this is not making things better, you know, if we're not growing together, I I couldn't care. It's not possible. I don't have time for it. Like,
There's no response to a not self relationship anymore.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I can't take it. The thing was is I'm screaming in my car at the top of my lungs, "What the hell am I gonna do?" And then I breathe and it's like, "Okay, I can take care of myself a little bit. I'm learning how to take care of myself, you know, as a receptive personality, I don't know how to take care of myself."
Well, like as a third line, the amount of times that we can go back into a situation that somebody else is like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" Like people shake their head at me all the time when they're not third lines. If I tell anybody
Mm.
that's not a third line about something I'm attempting to redo, they see it as
Oh.
like the worst use of my energy that I never learned that I but when I talk to another third line, I'm like, I'm gonna go back into this thing that was a fucking
So
disaster last
oh,
time. And they're like,
yeah.
what are we doing differently this time? And I'm like,
Bing!
these things.
That riles me up because I've always been like, "Well, the reason it went wrong is because I did something wrong,
I figured it
obviously."
out, so I gotta try again.
Yeah, because I mean, this is how we figure it out. This is how we become attuned, is Imma know the difference between the fact and the fiction, and not only as a linguistic concept, because now, thanks to the correct sentence structure, I can discuss what makes a fact different from fiction babble linguistically, and yet getting that down to in the physics of the real world, that's a whole 'nother order of exciting.
These are great conversations, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really enjoyed it. I've been looking forward to having a conversation, honestly, for years. Like I
Really?
could, yeah, back when I had my old Instagram, I remember we had some kind of communication interaction before. And I kind of had this sense of, yeah, I honestly thought you were like a superhero or something. I felt like you were doing really good and out there doing a thing. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'd like to be able to do stuff like that.
That's so cool. And I saw that you have a new opener for your reels. Well done.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, thank you. It's inspired by your creations right there, because it's like, I like that. That's smooth, and it adds a little something for that, like, they hover over the video and they get to see something other than, "Hey."
Yeah, just immediately going into awkward talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap it up
Mm.
here. This is an awesome long
Yeah.
one. I love a good long talk. Where
Okay.
where can people come find you?
Yeah, you can find me. The easiest place is right here on YouTube. My channel is the Dharma Science Radio. So if you had a www.youtube.com/@ Dharma Science Radio, oh, there was a forward slash. Yeah, exactly. Boom, that's where I am. And I can easily send the link over if you'd want to include something like that. I've also got a link tree wherein people could click a button and sign up if they want to have a private conversation, which is kind of something like this, except for a little more focused on a chart. Because we can really dive into all kinds of these little details and stuff. And that is something I really appreciate. And it's why I love the one-on-one and the small communications, because there is so much detail that nothing matters unless I'm talking to you about your life. If I'm talking about the universal, I could be talking to anybody. And it's a whole place wherein no matter what I say, there's exceptions.
Well, I can't I can't speak to the trialed experience of having you read my body graph, but I can
Mm,
confidently say that of the people I've talked to about human design, I have a lot of confidence in your understanding,
mm,
your embodiment, and I would happily encourage people to try out working with you because I trust what you know.
thank you, thank you. That's an honor to receive.
It was really great to talk to you. Thanks for coming
Mhm.
on.
Hopefully, we'll have another conversation soon.
I think we will. Bye.
All right. Bye.